Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leisrealtalk. All right, it's the start of another week. All right, this week will officially end the Chinese New Year celebration. Tomorrow is the Lantern Festival. It's the 15th day of the New Year, which is Lantern Festival, and it's the day that ends the New Year celebration. So we have 2 weeks. All right, so let's talk about Japan. Japan's prime minister, his name is Shigeru Ishiba, recently visited the White House, where he held a joint press conference with President Trump. He's the second foreign leader to visit since Trump's inauguration, underscoring the strategic importance of U.S. Japan relations. What we know what drives the Japan-US alliance are the evolving dynamics between Washington and Beijing. Likewise, US influence is the key factor shaping Japan-China ties. The Japan-China-US triangle remains the most crucial yet elusive geopolitical relationship in the Pacific. Now, we know Ishiba's visit came at a pivotal time when US-China are teetering on the brink of a trade war. China and Japan appear to be mending ties or relations. Prime Minister Ishiba faces mounting pressure from both his own party and opposition leaders, and critics are questioning Trump's use of tariffs against allies. Additionally, with political crisis unfolding in South Korea and Taiwan, which I talked extensively last week, you can check out my previous videos on that. The crisis in South Korea and Taiwan are due to Beijing's influence, right? Beijing's influence has created a deadlock between the executive branch and the opposition-controlled parliament. So the situation in Taiwan and South Korea has made Japan's position in the US-China rivalry becoming ever more sensitive and important. So the question, will Japan pivot toward China or the US? Well, I can give you the answer now. The visit was an overwhelming success for both Ishiba and Trump. The only party truly upset is the Chinese Communist government. But to fully understand the significance of his visit, we need to examine a couple of things. First, we need to understand the Japan-China relations and where it stands now. We also need to understand who Prime Minister Ishiba is and the challenges he faces. Then we should talk about the joint statement, the takeaways from the joint statement he signed with President Trump. And then, of course, we're going to address China's reaction. Last but not least, I squeeze in some information. I think it's important to talk about US-China relations, where it stands, because if we look at this shifting triangle, one of it is the US-China relations. So last but not least, we'll talk about US-China relations. All right, so first things first, Japan-China relations. Let me give you a chronological rundown of what has happened in the past 8 years. So starting in the summer of 2012, well, it's not 8 years, it's 12 years, sorry. Starting in the summer of 2012, tensions between China and Japan escalated rapidly, fueled by a series of events, including the Diaoyu Island dispute, or you could say Senkaku. What's the Japanese way to say it? Senkaku Islands, right? And the anti-Japanese protests in China, and the Japanese Prime Minister's visit to the Yasukuni Shrine. So by April 2020, both nations were preparing for a critical moment to repair relations. And Xi Jinping was scheduled to go to Japan during the cherry blossom season. It would be his first state visit to Japan. However, COVID-19 forced a postponement, but it still hasn't happened yet. Xi Jinping has never paid a state visit to Japan. It has yet to happen. Despite this, Japan made goodwill gestures, such as donating face masks printed with poems like, though lands apart, we share the same sky, um, on the masks donated to Wuhan. And there's a Japanese ballet company, I think it's the Matsuyama Ballet Company. They sang the Chinese national anthem in support of Wuhan. However, that's not enough to change the dynamics of the Sino-Japan relations. There are multiple incidents that have derailed the relations. Reports emerged of China's re-education camps in Xinjiang, prompting Japan to express concern through a parliamentary resolution, which angered Beijing. And then the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was vocal in supporting Taiwan, was celebrated by China's nationalists. Japan was outraged. Japan's discharge of treated nuclear wastewater, which meets international safety standard, is used by Chinese state media as anti-Japan material. And then Chinese tourists vandalized a Japanese shrine. It is the Yaku, what do you call that? Sorry. I forgot. Oh, the Yaku. I just said it. The Yakusuni. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, that shrine. Sorry, I want to remember the name. It's the Yasukuni Shrine. Yasukuni Shrine. Yeah, so the Chinese tourists have been vandalizing the shrine. And then, the attacks on Japanese school children in China, which further inflamed nationalist sentiments in both countries. So last summer, then Prime Minister Fumio Kishida resigned amid declining approval rating and a funding scandal. And then Shigeru Ishiba was elected as Japan's prime minister, new prime minister. Upon assuming office on October 1st, 2024, Ishiba faced significant challenges. In a snap general election held on October 27th, the Liberal Democratic Party, his party, lost parliamentary majority for the first time since 2009, leading to a minority government. Despite this setback, he was re-elected as prime minister by the legislative body on November 11th. So similar to South Korea and Taiwan, Japan's conservative ruling party is the minority in the legislative body. And in light of the recent parliamentary chaos in South Korea and Taiwan, there are experts who worry about Japan, who worry that Japan will become the next Asian country to experience political storms and instability because Prime Minister Ishiba isn't particularly popular within his own party. And his party, the LDP party, the Liberal Democratic Party, which is a conservative party, and it's also pro-West. This party has dominated the Japanese politics for decades. However, within the party, Ishiba is known for his pro-Beijing position. So let's now talk about who Ishiba is and his challenges. In his recently published autobiography, he refers to himself as a disciple of the former prime minister, Kakui Tanaka, who normalized relations with China in 1972. Ishiba repeatedly emphasized China's importance to Japan throughout the book. And so in July 1972, Prime Minister Tanaka took office. The following month, he sent his foreign minister to visit China. And on September 29th, 1972, the two countries signed a joint statement in Beijing, officially restoring diplomatic relations. This historic moment occurred 85 days after Tanaka assumed office. Now, on December 25th last year, Ishiba sent his foreign minister to visit China. Notably, this visit also took place 85 days after Ishiba became prime minister. So his move was widely seen as the gesture that began Ishiba's effort to improve relations with China. Before assuming office, Ishiba visited Taiwan last August and met with President William Lai. When asked how Japan should respond if Taiwan were invaded, unlike his predecessors like Shinzo Abe and Toro Aso, who had taken a clearer stance, Ishiba did not explicitly express support for Taiwan. He met with Xi Jinping while attending G20 summit in I think it was South America last November. Both expressed their desire to establish a constructive and stable bilateral relationship. Under Ishiba, China-Japan relations did make progress. So this January 15th, Chinese Premier Li Qiang met in Beijing with the Secretary General of Japan's ruling party, the LDP, and the Secretary General of the Komeito Party, which is the LDP's coalition partner. They vote together. The Japanese representatives held talks with at least 5 senior CCP leaders at the Politburo level and above. This marked the first time in 18 years that China and Japan's ruling parties established an exchange mechanism. Meanwhile, a delegation from the PLA's Eastern Theater Command visited Japan from January 13th to the 17th. The delegation met with officials from Japan's Ministry of Defense and Joint Staff Office of the Self-Defense Forces and visited military facilities. This visit was the first China-Japan military exchange in 5 years. Given that the Eastern Theater Command oversees the East China Sea, Eastern China, and the Taiwan Strait, and is the military theater responsible for military attacks on Taiwan, this visit was closely watched by China observers. So these developments have fueled criticism and skepticism in Japan. Concerns have been raised within Japan's ruling party and society. People question the government's decision to even ease visa requirements for Chinese tourists. Many people, including those in his own party, strongly oppose Ishiba's China policy. At one point, his approval rating was very low. And the prime minister faces the challenges of leading a minority government with strong opposition from both within his own party and from opposition parties in parliament. He must pass the 2025 fiscal budget by the end of March. Also, his leadership will be tested this year in 2 key elections, the Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly election in June and then House of Councilors election in July. I think the House of Councilors is like the upper house. It's like the equivalent of Senate in the U.S. So as Japan's leader, Ishiba urgently needs to establish a good relationship with the new U.S. president. He had requested to meet with President Trump twice, but they didn't work out. So he came to the U.S. last week for a 24-hour visit. After their talk, the 2 leaders issued a joint statement and held a press conference together, introducing their commitment to what they called a new golden era in U.S.-Japan relations. So let me now talk about the key takeaways from their joint statement. Well, aside from reaffirming their long-standing commitments to each other, such as the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty covering the Senkaku Islands, keeping the Indo-Pacific region free and open, supporting peaceful resolutions for cross-strait issues, and opposing any attempts to change the status quo by force or coercion, There were some notable new developments worth paying attention to. I summarize them in three points. First is Japan made it clear that it is determined to build up its defense capabilities, and the U.S. fully backs this move. This means Japan is looking for more flexibility in strengthening its military, and the Trump administration is on board. Ishiba played this very smart. He understands Trump's approach to alliances. Right? Trump wants allies to take more responsibility for their own defense by buying U.S. military equipment instead of relying too much on American protection. So this applies to Taiwan as well, making it good time for Taiwan to boost its military purchases. However, Trump did not pressure Ishida to increase Japan's defense spending for now. And this is largely due to consideration that Ishiba's political support in the parliament is fragile at the moment. However, the U.S. may request Japan to raise their defense budget above 2% of GDP in next year's U.S.-Japan summit after the election this July. And then the second point is Ishiba scored a big win by avoiding a trade war, by avoiding tariffs from the U.S. Japan was worried that the U.S. might impose reciprocal tariffs to reduce the trade deficit. But Trump didn't give a clear answer. Instead, both countries said that they would work together to reduce the trade deficit, the U.S. trade deficit with Japan. And the key measures Japan agreed to include increased natural gas and shale oil purchases from the U.S., probably through a gas pipeline from Alaska. This is a win-win for both countries because 90% of Japan's energy currently comes from the Middle East, and the country needs a second major supplier. And then Japan agreed to invest over $1 trillion in the U.S., focusing on AI, computing power, and quantum technology. And then Japan would drop the plans to buy U.S. steel. Instead, Japan would invest in the U.S. steel industry through joint ventures and factory upgrades. So these moves hit all the right notes for Trump, who immediately agreed to visit Japan. And I think the biggest, the most significant, I mean, those two are significant, but the biggest shift is military cooperation is getting stronger. More U.S. and Japanese troops will be stationed in Japan's southwestern islands, which are closer to Taiwan. This sends a clear signal to China, and they will be upgrading. They will upgrade command and control systems for both U.S. and Japanese forces. The second point I just mentioned, the upgrade command and control systems, was mentioned very briefly in the statement. It may sound insignificant, but it's a big deal because this means the U.S. recognized Japan's move toward a unified joint military command. And U.S. is expanding the authority of its forces in Japan, right? Allowing for faster and more coordinated military action in the event of something happening cross strait. So why does this matter? Because Japan's self-defense forces have always been divided into separate branches, and by law, they weren't allowed to operate under a single unified command. Instead, each branch coordinates with the U.S. military separately. The highest ranking officer, the chief of staff or joint staff, mostly serve only as an advisor, not an actual commander. Now, by creating a unified joint operation command, Japan is streamlining its military leadership, making joint operations more effective. So in simple terms, Japan's military is getting much stronger and more efficient. And this is something that China has been dreading. And on top of that, the U.S. military command in Japan is getting an upgrade. The commander will now be a 4-star general. The U.S. forces in Japan will get more authority over military operations, including some direct command over Japan's self-defense forces. So this makes it much easier for the U.S. and Japan to respond quickly to any crisis in the region. So this successful Trump-Ishiba meeting gave many political observers, including myself, a sense of big relief. Before his visit, Japanese politicians and media were skeptical about his trip because Ishiba is not a very personable politician. He appears serious, studious, and sometimes even nerdy. People say uh, so while Trump can be tough and loud. So so many Japanese politicians at home expressed their relief and optimism about the future of U.S.-Japan relations. So for example, LDP's Senator Hiroshi Yamada told Japanese media that he had previously learned that Trump and his inner circle had a harsh view of Prime Minister Ishiba, probably because of his pro-China stance or history, right? However, after seeing this Japanese senator said, after seeing their meeting on TV, the senator felt relieved and reassured of a U.S.-China alliance. And the 20-minute joint press conference allowed both leaders to directly discuss key issues, reinforcing transparency and confidence in U.S.-Japan relations, because it's one thing you say it on paper and another thing that you actually, put it out in front of the press when you are side by side answering questions. And it's interesting that Ishiba became very personable when talking about his meeting with President Trump. He said that he had been watching Trump on TV for years. But meeting him in person was a touching experience. I think it's not a very good translation. I understand. I think the Japanese is probably the same as Chinese, 感动. It's a very, I don't think touching is the right way. Maybe inspirational. Yeah. So he said he's been watching him on TV for years, but meeting him is inspirational. He said on TV, he said Trump comes across as loud, strong-willed, and sometimes intimidating. Those are his words. But when he meets him in person, he said President Trump is a genuinely honest and powerful leader with a deep sense of mission for America and the world, without the usual political niceties. So that's what the Japanese PM said. And then Trump praised Ishiba for being tough and called him a good leader. Now, privately, I read that Trump is said to be impressed with Ishiba's tenacity. This man had pursued the position of prime minister 5 times, going way back as early as 2008. The first 4 times he failed, but during his 5th campaign in 2024, he was successful. It was said that Trump was impressed by his tenacity. Now let's talk about China's reaction. China originally expected that U.S. relations with traditional allies like South Korea and Japan would weaken during Trump's 2nd term. But Ishida's visit proves that this expectation was wrong. So this certainly has disappointed Beijing. And on February 10th, China lodged a stern protest with Japan over what it called, quote, negative China-related developments during Japanese Prime Minister's visit to Washington. His meeting with the U.S. President Donald Trump and the joint statement issued after meeting. So that's what, so the Chinese perceive his visit, the meeting, and the joint statement all impact China negatively And so the Chinese lodged a stern protest. At the same time, a spokesperson from Beijing's Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirmed that China also lodged uh, a protest with the U.S. Embassy. Liu Jingsong, the Director General of the Asian Affairs Department within the ministry, met with, I think, Japanese diplomat. His name is Hiroshi Yokochi. I'm not quite sure about his position, but he works. It said it's a minister at the Japanese embassy in China. So yeah, so the Japanese diplomat was called to hear the complaint from the Chinese as a form of protest um, to convey China's dissatisfaction. All right, so well, that's pretty strong reaction from China. So that tells you that the meeting was very successful for Japan and the United States, judging by China's reaction. Now let's talk about China-U.S. relations. Let's talk about that and also the key developments in the trade war 2.0. Beijing has been very busy in trying to repair relations with the United States. Last fall, I think it was People's Daily, one of the state media, launched an essay competition to solicit best stories about U.S.-China friendship. And now this, just 2 weeks ago, CCTV, the most watched TV event of the year in China, which is CCTV's Lunar New Year Gala, for the first time featured two Americans. A young man from Minneapolis by the name of Evan Kyle. Is it Kyle or Kale? Kale sounds like the vegetable. Kyle, Kail. Maybe you guys can help me how to pronounce it. Kyle, right? Evan Kyle. Okay, he owns he's an American antique dealer. He runs a pawn shop in Minneapolis. He donated a World War II album to the Chinese. So in September 2022, he received a photo album which documented with like 30 picture photos that documented Japanese war crimes during the Nanjing massacre. Evan donated the album to the Chinese Consulate General in Chicago, and he was invited to China for a visit. And so because of that, he was given a 3-minute interview. He was featured during the Lunar New Year Gala on TV. And so the Chinese call him the first person who does not speak Chinese appearing at the New Year Gala. Yeah, he is the first person who doesn't speak Chinese appearing at the gala. And the other American element was the pop rock band One Republic, which performed their hit song, Counting Stars, in front of a famous pagoda in Wuhan. So the inclusion of not one, but two Americans in the CCTV's biggest event of the year is extremely rare. Even the Chinese find it shocking. They're like, are we supposed to not like the Americans? Aren't the Americans the ones who are causing our economic stress? And now all of a sudden we see them on our Lunar New Year celebration? What's going on? Well, the good time didn't last. On February the 4th, the U.S. imposed a 10% additional tariff on Chinese exports, including goods from Hong Kong. And this is on top of the 25% tariff Trump imposed during his first term, which Biden had kept. So in response, China imposed tariffs of 10 to 15% on U.S. goods starting yesterday, February the 10th. and covering U.S. coal and liquefied natural gas, oil, agricultural machinery, pickup trucks. And also China exercised export controls on 5 critical minerals used in military, industrial, and high-tech manufacturing. And then the Commerce Department launched investigation into Google's monopoly in China. And then also identified 2 American companies, PVH Group and Illumina, as unreliable entity. It has added these 2 companies to China's unreliable entity list. And their operations in China are restricted. Now, some say these measures indicate an escalation in trade tensions and could signal the beginning of a new phase in the trade war. But if you look carefully, you'll see that all of Beijing's countermeasures are for shows. It's for the regime's domestic audiences. Because China's imports of American coal, natural gas, and oil account for only 0.8%, 5.4%, and under 2% of China's total imports of each item, respectively. That's nothing. And how many Chinese buy American pickup trucks? I mean, if those of you who live in China, do you ever see American pickup trucks on Chinese streets? Very, very, very rarely. Now, Google doesn't even have any consumer offering in China, right? I was told Google has an AI R&D operations in China. But why does Google have its AI R&D center in China? Aren't they concerned with the Chinese stealing their trade secrets? No, I don't know. And also, Google has some cloud computing business in China. Calling it a monopoly is a joke because not even the Chinese believe it. And then the PVH Group is the parent company of 2 American apparel brands. I think it's Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger. Excuse me. So, and then these 2 apparel companies have boycotted Xinjiang cotton, and they are moving their manufacturing away from China. So putting them on unreliable entity list and restrict their operations is like, it has no impact on the company because they're already moving out. They might have already moved out completely. So these countermeasures are just for show. However, those measures didn't make Trump happy. And because of them, Trump said he's not in a hurry to talk to Xi Jinping. Now, what I want to tell you is there's something very unusual about this, and that is the Chinese state media. While Beijing announced the 4 countermeasures, state media remained extremely quiet. Unlike during Trade War 1.0, when the state media was playing offense, attacks on Americans all over, this time they were collectively quiet. So this is very unusual. So experts say they're confused and don't know what to say. Between the strong pro-American New Year gala and the tariff countermeasures, these Chinese state media don't know what Xi Jinping wants, so they choose to remain silent. And some believe that the collective silence by state media is a reflection of Xi Jinping's state of mind, because he doesn't know how, he doesn't even know how he he doesn't know what he wants or how to respond either. And people say at this point, he is not sure what to do next. So that's the state of this trade war 2.0, as I see it. Okay, so that's all for today. I've been talking for quite a long time. I will I will just mention the reason I started this live stream a little late today is because um, I have been I was laughing hysterically because I have a fan. His name is Ben. Ben. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. He calls himself Lay's uninvited English teacher. He sends me an email and corrected me corrected my pronunciation of the word aerospace. You know how you said, the aerospace, aerodynamics. Um, he's The way I pronounced it is like aerospace, like arrow, shooting an arrow. So he explained to me it's not arrow, but rather it's a like when you say the word hair. So I was dying trying to figure out how to say this word before starting this live stream. So it's not aerospace, it's aerospace? Like hair? Arrow? Is it aerospace? You know, as a non-native speaker, we struggle with vowels. I told you about, like between E, like I mispronounced the word crepe. I once said, when my boss asked me, "What are you eating for lunch?" I said crap. And everyone in the office was laughing. They said, Lay eats crap for lunch. But, it's like it's not crap, it's crepe. Yeah, but and then when I realized I didn't pronounce the vowel correctly, uh, I said I was eating crepe. And so my boss was even more upset. He was joking. He said, is that what you're calling me? A creep? So between creep, crap, and crap. I'm telling you, vowels are challenging. So how do you say this word again? Not aerospace. Aerospace? Is it aerospace? All right, I'll stop here. It's difficult for me because I don't hear you guys hear me. I don't hear you. So I still don't know how to pronounce this word. I was struggling. I was laughing. Aerospace. Anyways, okay, let's see. Oh, I have some color stickers. Okay, let's see. Daniel McGinnis. Well, thank you, Daniel, for always being there for me. Okay, great. Let's see. So I hope people would tell me how to pronounce that word. But this is hard because I can't hear you guys. Okay, Jeff Ramos. Well, thank you, Jeff, for tea or mozzarella resupplies. Well, thank you so much. I haven't had mozzarella in tea for a while. I was reading, someone commented that the fact that I put mozzarella cheese in my tea would make Italians very upset. Is that true? Are there any Italians on the line? Would I make you very upset if I put mozzarella cheese in my tea? Beady McGee. Well, thank you, Beady. All right. Okay. All right. Correct. Aerospace. Oh, everyone's helping me. Emil J.A. Bring the East Coast and West Coast together. Do a collab with the China show, please. Okay. All right. You can talk to them. Aerospace. Air. Correct. Air. Everyone is helping me. Aerospace. Makes no difference. Brandon Smith said makes no difference. If I say aerospace or aerospace. Laughing out loud. Okay, crab. Lei eats crab for lunch. Like you're saying arrow with space, despite the spelling. Uh, yeah, but then Ben was nice enough to say that he actually said, mind you, perhaps there are parts of America which say it more closely to the way you do. So it could be maybe some Americans do say aerospace the way I said it, the way I say it. Google, not Google. Huh? What's the difference? Google, party on. Okay. Well, everyone is jumping on me over my pronunciation. Okay, here's some. Um, all right, let's get serious. Texas Panda. Oh, that's not addressed to me. Anthony Lay, rum or pineapple, Captain Morgan's? Trick question. Call me either way. Rum or pineapple, Captain Morgan's? That's a trick question. I don't drink alcohol. I do not drink alcohol. Yeah. Actually, I think most Chinese women don't drink. Right? I think drinking is a guy's thing. Chinese women think fine drink. I don't know about today's Chinese women. Maybe they're different. But I think drinking alcohol is, is a guy's thing. Yeah, women, we don't drink. I mean, we can drink, but we don't. We don't think it's a very feminine thing to do. It's a very masculine thing to do. Anyways, but American women might disagree with me. Okay, here's a question forwarded by Chris from Gray Tabby. What will be the impact of the U.S.-China trade war and U.S. aid cuts? The U.S. aid cuts shouldn't have any impact on U.S.-China trade. I saw one of the officers in U.S. aid is, what's her name? Her last name is Wu. She's a Chinese Americans. She works very closely with the Chinese. She's well known in China. So you have officers in U.S. aid that works closely with the Chinese. So it's probably a good thing to cut it. I mean, to cut U.S. aid. Because the real Chinese people who are in need of help, I don't think are getting the money. I mean, how would USA send the money to the poor people that we've seen in my videos who are really in need of money? They will upset the Chinese government. But if they do it officially, if they give the money to the Chinese agencies, that means the money isn't going anywhere. It just feeds, into Chinese corruption. So what would be the impact of U.S.-China trade war? Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to figure out. I mean, my last talk, part of the last part of my talk was trying to figure out where does this trade war 2.0 go? But it's very strange. The Chinese media are not talking about it. People are saying Xi Jinping doesn't know where to go from here, and Trump isn't interested in talking to him at this point. So we'll just have to wait a little bit to see where it goes. Aerospace. Well, thank you, India Burke. Okay, that's clear. Aerospace. Aerospace. Party on. Thank you. Okay, comment from Jonathan Doe. Trump puts 25% tariff on steel and aluminum on all imports to America. This includes Japan, and Japan did not get any deal, as far as I know. Yeah, this is everyone. This is everyone. Yeah, that's Chinese. This is everyone. Mamma mia. Anyways. All right. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Wow. Thank you, Daniel, for the successive color stickers. Moonwalker, there are two online tools that will pronounce the word for you after you type it in. I think it would be extremely helpful. Well, the thing is, you don't know what you don't know. Like I wouldn't know. I wouldn't think that I need to check how to pronounce the word aerospace. I thought I was saying it correctly. But until someone sent me a email, um, and yeah, yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Wow. Okay, Brian Cobb. Even Americans cannot speak proper English, and English spelling is even worse. There's only one rule. Everything is an exception to the rule. Everything is an exception to the rule. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Daniel. Um, okay, this one, I cannot pronounce your name. Scythian Massacets. America is still capable of buying nuclear bombs as they wish, which are not permanent. Although they are in Japan and South Korea, Trump can withdraw them because they are the strongest. Okay, all right. I appreciate your comment. Well, thank you. I thank you. Sir Humphrey, thank you, Lei, for your hard work and keep us to date. Well, thank you. All right. I'm burning with a story to tell you. It has nothing to do with the topic tonight, but it has to do with the pronunciation. Since I'm I'm on this topic, I may as well tell you the joke. You know the word cellular. I'm saying it correctly, hopefully. Cellular. When I was working years ago in a bank doing budgets on IT budgets, and we have the line item budget for cellular, I didn't say it right because when you look at it, because the L can go together with the U. So I said cellular. So every time I'm presenting my budget, people look at me thinking, what's wrong with this woman? And some people may find my pronunciation cute. I say cellular. And finally, but people didn't bother to tell me. And I had one colleague, Matt. He was very nice. He told me, Lei, it's cellular, not cellular. But I said the L, the U. But if you put the L and the U together, that's cellular. He said, no, it's cellular. So I remember that. I remember that conversation profoundly today. So I just want to tell you that to show you the struggle that non-native speakers have, to speak English. Something that you take for, that you take for granted is a struggle for us. That's all. Someone said your accent is sexy. All right, I hope so. I think imperfection sometimes is interesting, right? Okay, that's all for today. There's enough of oh, here's a question forwarded by Chris. I got that prophecy book by the Japanese anime person. Oops, mean manga, the manga book. That incident among Japan and the rest in July looks to originate an equal distance from each. What does that mean? That incident among Japan and the rest in July looks to originate an equal distance from each. Yeah, that book, the Japanese manga book, predicts that there's a major earthquake in July that will shift, that will make Japan, no, not Japan, I think Taiwan, Philippines, like it will merge the continental plates will shift, and they will be merged and connected. Imagine the Philippines and Taiwan will be connected. It will create tremendous chaos. I mean, disaster. Anyways. All right, that's all for today. I thank you for joining. I'll keep learning English. Help me with my pronunciation if you can. I appreciate it. And thank you, Ben, my uninvited English teacher. Okay, that's all for tonight. Bye-bye.